The snow fell in thick, relentless sheets that December night, blanketing Manhattan in a deceptive beauty that masked the brutal cold beneath. Marcus Chen had just left his office at Chen Technologies, his mind heavy with quarterly reports and acquisition deals, when his 6-year-old daughter, Emma, tugged at his coat sleeve with an urgency that made him stop mid-stride. "Daddy, please," she whispered, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. "That girl over there, she's shaking so much." Marcus followed his daughter's gaze to a doorway across the street where a teenage girl sat huddled against the building, her threadbare jacket offering no real protection against the bitter wind. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and her thin frame trembled violently. She couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17 years old. Something in Marcus's chest tightened. He'd walked past countless homeless people in this city, always in too much of a hurry, always with too much on his mind. But tonight, looking at his daughter's pleading eyes and then back at that shivering girl, he couldn't take another step forward. "Wait here, Emma," he said, but his daughter shook her head firmly. "No, Daddy, we help her together." They crossed the street, and as they approached, the girl looked up with eyes that held equal parts fear and resignation. She had delicate features beneath the grime, and her dark hair hung in tangled knots around her face. "Miss," Marcus said gently, crouching down to her level. "My name is Marcus. This is my daughter Emma. You're going to freeze out here tonight. Will you let us help you?" The girl stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether this was some kind of trick. "I'm fine," she mumbled through chattering teeth, but her body betrayed her words with another violent shiver. Emma stepped forward and, without hesitation, removed her own pink scarf and wrapped it around the girl's neck. "You're not fine," she said with the blunt honesty only a child could deliver. "Please let us help you." Something in the girl's defenses cracked. A tear rolled down her dirty cheek and she nodded almost imperceptibly. Marcus helped her to her feet, shocked at how light she was, how frail. He hailed a taxi, and within 20 minutes they were at his penthouse apartment. His housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, took one look at the situation and immediately sprang into action, preparing a hot bath and laying out clean clothes. While the girl bathed, Emma sat outside the bathroom door like a loyal guardian. "What's your name?" she called through the door. There was a long pause, then a quiet voice. "Sophie." "My name is Sophie." Over the next few hours, Sophie's story emerged in fragments. She'd been in foster care since she was 8, bouncing between homes where she was either neglected or worse. 3 months ago, just after her 17th birthday, she'd run from her latest placement after her foster father had come into her room, one night with intentions that made Marcus's blood boil. She'd been surviving on the streets ever since, too afraid to go back into the system, too proud to beg. Marcus made a decision that night that would change all their lives. He called his attorney first thing in the morning. The legal process was complicated. Marcus had to navigate social services, background checks, and mountains of paperwork. But he was a CEO who'd built a tech empire from nothing. He knew how to be persistent. Sophie was still a minor, and while she initially resisted the idea of being taken in, Emma's unwavering friendship slowly broke down her walls. "You can stay in the guest room," Emma had announced that first night with the confidence of someone making a permanent arrangement. "It has its own bathroom and everything, and you can use my art supplies whenever you want." Sophie had smiled then, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "You like art?" "I love it. Do you?" That was the beginning. Sophie moved into the guest room temporarily, which became less temporary as weeks turned into months. Marcus enrolled her in a private school, got her counseling to deal with her trauma, and slowly, carefully, gave her the space to heal while making sure she knew she had a home. But it wasn't charity. Sophie gave back in ways Marcus hadn't expected. She was brilliant, especially with numbers and patterns. She taught herself coding at the public library during her time on the streets. And when Marcus discovered this, he was astounded by her natural talent. She also had an eye for design, for seeing solutions to problems from angles his seasoned engineers missed. More than that, she became Emma's big sister in every way that mattered. She helped with homework, attended school plays, and stood up to a bully who'd been bothering Emma at the playground with a fierce protectiveness that made Marcus's heart swell. Years passed. Sophie graduated high school at the top of her class, then college on a full scholarship. She'd wanted to do it on her own merit, to prove she could. Marcus respected that, though he'd quietly set up a trust fund she didn't know about yet. She interned at Chen Technologies every summer, and her innovations in user interface design caught the attention of everyone in the company. By the time Sophie was 25, she was heading her own department at Chen Technologies, leading a team of developers twice her age. Emma was now 14 and the two of them were inseparable. Marcus had never remarried. After his wife died when Emma was 3, he'd thrown himself into work and fatherhood. But his daughters, biological and chosen, had filled his life with more meaning than any boardroom victory ever could. Then came the day that would test everything they'd built together. Marcus was in a morning meeting when his assistant burst in, her face pale. "Mr. Chen, there's been an accident. Emma's school bus—" He didn't hear the rest. He was already running. The bus had been hit by a delivery truck that ran a red light. Multiple children were injured, but Emma had taken the worst of it. She was in surgery when Marcus arrived at the hospital, and the doctors' faces told him everything he didn't want to know. Traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding. The next 72 hours would be critical. Marcus sat in the waiting room, his mind blank with terror, when Sophie burst through the doors. She'd been in a meeting with investors in Boston, but she'd caught the first flight back. She was still in her business suit, her face streaked with tears. "Where is she?" Sophie demanded. "Where's Emma?" They sat together through that endless day and into the night. Sophie held Marcus's hand when the doctors came with updates that were never quite encouraging enough. She made phone calls to family and friends. She was the strong one when Marcus felt like he was falling apart. On the second day, when Emma's condition worsened and the doctors started using words like "prepare yourself," Sophie did something that shocked everyone. "Test me," she said to the doctors, "for whatever she needs. Bone marrow, blood, organs, I don't care. Test me for everything." "Sophie, you don't have to—" Marcus started, but she cut him off. "She's my sister," Sophie said fiercely. "You saved my life when I was freezing to death in a doorway. You gave me everything. Let me give something back." As it turned out, Emma needed a kidney. The internal bleeding had caused damage that her young body couldn't recover from on its own. The waiting list was long, too long, but Sophie was a match. The transplant surgery was risky, especially given Emma's weakened condition. Marcus sat in another waiting room, this time with both his daughters in surgery, and realized that the girl he'd helped 8 years ago out of simple human decency had become the person who might save the daughter he'd loved from birth. The surgeries took hours. Marcus paced. He prayed to gods he wasn't sure he believed in. He called Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been with them since Emma was born, and she rushed to the hospital to wait with him. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Mr. Chen?" Both surgeries went well. It's still early, but the kidney is functioning, and Emma's vital signs are stabilizing. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Mrs. Rodriguez caught him, and he wept into her shoulder like he hadn't since his wife died. The recovery was long. Sophie and Emma shared a hospital room during those first critical days, and watching them together, Sophie in one bed, Emma in another, holding hands across the space between them, Marcus understood that family was never about biology. It was about showing up. It was about love in action. Emma made a full recovery. The scar on her side matched the one on Sophie's, and they joked about being kidney sisters now. Sophie took 3 months off work to help Emma through physical therapy, and Marcus watched as his younger daughter grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally, seeing the sacrifice Sophie had made. On the anniversary of the day they'd first met, 8 years after that snowy December night, Marcus gathered his daughters in the living room. He had something to show them. He pulled out a folder of legal documents. "Sophie, I started these papers years ago, but I wanted to wait until you were ready. I'm not trying to replace anything you've lost or anyone you've had. But if you're willing, I'd like to officially adopt you. Not because I saved you, but because you saved us." Sophie's hands trembled as she took the papers. Tears streamed down her face. "I was so angry back then," she whispered. "Angry at the world, angry at every adult who'd failed me. I was ready to just disappear into that cold." Then Emma's little face appeared, and she looked at me like I mattered, like I was worth saving. "You were," Emma said, moving to sit next to Sophie on the couch. "You are. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't stopped that night." Sophie continued, looking at Marcus. "Probably dead. Definitely not here, not whole, not happy. You gave me a life, Dad. You gave me a family. Of course I'll sign them." She said the word so naturally. Dad. It was the first time she'd called him that, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest. A piece of himself he hadn't known was missing, clicking into place. They signed the papers together, right there in the living room where they'd had countless movie nights, homework sessions, and conversations about everything from calculus to heartbreak. Mrs. Rodriguez served champagne for the adults and sparkling cider for Emma, and they toasted to family, to second chances, to the power of choosing to help even when it's inconvenient. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, Sophie and Marcus stood on the balcony looking out at the city lights. Snow was falling again, just like it had been that night 8 years ago. "Do you ever think about it?" Sophie asked. "What made you stop? You must have passed hundreds of homeless people before. What was different that night?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. "Honestly, it was Emma. The way she looked at you, like your suffering was intolerable to her. She reminded me that we're not supposed to just walk past each other's pain. We're supposed to stop. We're supposed to care." "She was 6 years old," Sophie said, shaking her head in wonder. "And she had more compassion than most adults I'd met in my entire life." "She learned it from her mother," Marcus said. "Sarah was like that too, always stopping to help, always seeing people. I'd gotten so caught up in work after she died, in just surviving, that I'd forgotten how to really see people." Emma remembered for both of us. Sophie leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm grateful every day. For all of it, even the hard parts, because the hard parts led me here." Marcus wrapped an arm around his daughter. His daughter, legally now, but his daughter in his heart for years already. "Me too," he said. "Me too." Inside, Emma was already asleep, her scar hidden under her pajamas, her dreams full of the art project she and Sophie were planning for the weekend. She'd never remember being the catalyst for this family, the 6-year-old who'd refused to walk past someone in need. But her father and sister would remember. They'd carry that lesson forward. Years later, when Sophie gave the commencement address at her alma mater, she told their story. She talked about freezing in a doorway, about a little girl's compassion, about a single father who chose kindness even when he was exhausted and grieving and overwhelmed. She challenged the graduates to do the same. "Don't walk past people's suffering," she said to the sea of faces before her. "Stop, see them. Help if you can. You never know. That moment of inconvenience, that choice to care, might save a life. It might create a family. It might change everything." In the audience, Marcus sat with Emma, now a college freshman herself, and they held hands as they listened. The girl he'd helped had become a woman who helped others. The daughter who'd begged him to stop had grown into someone who never walked past suffering herself. And it had all started with a simple plea on a snowy night. "Please help her, Daddy." He had, and in helping her, she had helped them all.